So the sound in the other video was a bit on the lower end, so I pumped up the volume a bit. I hope that helps. But here we are again, and now we're going to do...
You're not streaming on Discord.
Of course, I'm not streaming on Discord. Let me fix that, because I killed the stream because I was watching news, while all the other people here were talking about Linux. All right, so now we're going to start with the fun stuff. Now, Speed2 made a good comment on why aren't you first making it compatible with co-op, so that you are guaranteed that it can end up on the FAF co-op tab. And the reason for that is that I first want to give you all something to toy around with yourself before we make sure that everything we do is 100% compatible with that co-op tab. So for this section, we're going to be looking into just making a base manager, make it work, see how it all ticks, and then in future sessions, I think in 2 weeks from now, we're going to take a step back and make all the code compatible, so that if you want to publish your map as an actual co-op map where people can add timings in the leaderboard through the client and everything, then that will be possible. That said, let's get going. So we saw in the previous video of this map that we have areas, units, unit groups, we have markers, and we have chains. And we have an editor that crashed. So let's restart that real quick. By all means, the editor tends to crash sometimes. Luckily, it's not a fatal crash like you have in the game, but it is a soft crash. So it tells you that it crashed, you should save, and then you should just restart it. And in this case, we have a different map. And we're just going to start preparing the map for what we want to do. And we're going to do that by looking at all the markers and then say something like, nah, that's better. So let's start with blank. We want to show blank markers, we want to show resources, we want to show camera markers, and spawn points are probably useful. And that's about it. In terms of the map and the armies, we will be having... I think there are extra armies. I'm not entirely sure. Let's look at our example. Right, we have the scenario here. We have actual armies of the Siren and the neutral Siren here. So in this case, Army 1 is going to be the player. And then here we have... okay, so what are we fighting? We are fighting... we have a UEF ally. There we go. And we have by all means, a UEF enemy too, because we're going rogue. That's the story. And we're going to remove all the other armies. Now, I think I'm making a mistake here, because I don't recall these showing up in the lobby. Speed2, are you here by any chance?
Yeah. The lobby code is modified to read only player armies. I mean armies that start with player in the string. So that's why it's not showing the AI.
Okay. So that means that when we open up our map in the lobby, it's going to look a bit different. Yep. That's fine. We'll work with that. That's why we should have really just done the co-op initialization that Speed2 was talking about. And we're going to introduce an area. Now, this is the default playable area. Note that if we disable this, we get the rest of the map, which actually looks kind of good. Didn't actually expect it to fit in like that, but let's hide that in. And we're just going to start with a small area of the map. Let's see what looks good. Now, areas are always square. What was that? Area 01? Or was that all capital? 001. Let's go for that. And we're just going to start with the naming convention that we can see here in the save files, which is start camera and blah, 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 blah. There should be an M1 playable area. So let's call this M1, which is mission 1 playable area. There we go. Now the name is just for you to make sure you understand your code and your references. So if you so make sure that whatever name you use, make sure that it is a same name. I would highly recommend you though to use the same style of naming. And the reason for that is that if you come to us for help, then you don't have to explain whatever naming convention you used. Then we immediately understand, oh, this is part of mission 2 or something like that. This is the X, Y, this is the left top point, which is right there. That's the bottom right point, which is right there. So we're going to need something like 200. It's a bit much. 128. Let's just give it the entire map. And this is going to be, say, 600. Seems fine. And then this is the X, which is roughly at 600. That's a bit too much. That's a bit too little. All right. Let's actually start it quite a bit bigger. There we go. And then we want this to be at 896 to match the original boundary, as essentially the map stops at this area right here. So this is our first playable map. So let's just try and see if we can, there we go. That's our first little playable area. So let's save the map. Always make sure that you save. It's always very critical. And we're just going to add some markers to it so that we have something to toy with. Now, by all means, I'm making up this mission as I go, so it's probably going to be horrible design. But for the sake of it, let's assume that our allied base is right here at the back. And our allied base is going to need some power, some more mass markers, and we're going to spawn in right here. And we don't need hydrocarbon plants. Who needs those? So let's just spawn in some additional mass markers. Let's spawn in right in there. We're going to add a hydro right here. Again, what I'm doing here is pretty much as random as you're going to get it. Just trying to make something that looks slightly sane. Right, so we have 5 mass extractors at the start, and we can easily expand to down here and get the remainder. Now, our ally is really not that rich in mass. So let's give it one more. Let's just put it right there. All right. So that's going to give us sufficient to start off with. We're going to need a spawn location. It's going to be a scripted spawn. So let's call this M1 start location. There we go. That is where we will spawn. And now we're going to be, we're going to need some base, some units. So let's look at it. We have our armies here. Now the names here didn't update because that only happens on launch. So let's restart the editor real quick so that we are clear on our names. There we go. All right, beautiful. Everything we did still there. There we go. UEF ally, UEF enemy. Now, just to make things confusing, because that's how we roll. Usually, player groups look like this, where you have difficulty 3, difficulty 2, difficulty 1, which means that difficulty 3 has the most units. But in the case that we're building our allied base here, we're going to do the reverse. So instead of having, what's the naming convention here? East base, south base. So here we have M1 south base. Is that one word? No, that's two words. South base D1. So if we are on the easy difficulty, the base will be larger. Now, oh, there we go. M1 south base D2, there we go. And here again, no. Open that one up, there we go. M1 south base D3. So if we have the most difficult setting, then the base will be smallest. Now this map had all of the units nicely stored in these mass factories defense. You can do that for the sake of the fact that I'd like to get this going. I'm not going to do that. So let's just get in some units.
Yeah, those extra groups doesn't have any extra purpose, just for you to organize things.
Yeah.
It's gonna work even if you mash all the units inside that D1 group.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if we are on the hard difficulty, we are UEF. So let's click on UEF. Oh, completely forgot. This editor, and that's the news. You can find this editor on GitHub too. I'll make sure that there's a link in the YouTube. It's this editor right here, the FAF Map Editor Alpha. That should have probably been in the previous. How does this work? This is a later release, but it's not at the top.
It's a pre-release. It's not marked as stable.
Well, all right. Anyway, this is the version that I'm using right now. UEF, there we go. So the idea of the AI is that it's not going to be able to do a lot of it on its own. Instead, it's just going to it's just going to provide you with cover fire in terms of interceptors and bombers. So it's going to have a lot of air factories, and the land factories that it used to have is where we spawn as a player. That's roughly the idea. So we go select our group, make sure that you select the correct group. We're going to units, and then we're just going to start building our first base on the highest difficulty. So this is where our ally is really not worth much. You can enable the build grids, and you can enable, I think, or is that no, oh, there it is. So there we go. Using the build grid, the factory is 4x4 in terms of the grid size here. We're gonna make sure that it's right there. Now, usually factions have this very specific pattern that you find in the campaign missions. By all means, I highly encourage you to do that, but for the sake of the fact that we are trying not to spend too much time on the placing of units, and we really want to focus on the scripting, I'm just going to quickly place some things to make sure that we can get going. And there we go. We put some energy around that. Let's see. It's only going to have one hydrocarbon plant on the highest difficulty. That kind of allows the player to get this hydrocarbon plant, and it should definitely have extractors by all means. So let's drag those in and put them on the extractor spots. This extractor here at the edge is always going to be Tech 1. On the highest difficulty, it's not going to have this extractor. Actually, never mind. Just to make things easier. Let's see, what else do we have? We have maybe an additional right there, and it should probably have some form of defenses in place to guarantee that it doesn't get immediately overrun by essentially everything. And there we go. Now, usually you will likely want to, spice this up a bit, make it look like an actual base, but for the sake of the fact that I don't want to spend 40 minutes making a base, I'm just going to continue. So this is the outer, this is on the medium difficulty, so now he gets a bit more stuff. Let's add in some additional factories here. It's going to have this factory right there. It's going to have the other hydrocarbon plant. And it is gonna have a little flag. Actually, it's gonna have a triad here. Where is my triad? Let's just start with a radar then. I'm gonna put a radar here in the center. Ta-dum. And the radar needs power, so let's do that too. I just noticed that he should probably have some energy storage. So let's go back and guarantee that there is always some form of energy storage and give that some more power. And there we go. Back to the D2 base. I finally found the triad. It was right in my face. So let's place that right there. You can select units and orientate them using clicking on E or clicking on the button right here. W is moving them and E is rotating them. Kind of want to make that one look outside. And then on the easiest difficulty, again, I'm going through this pretty fast because I want to have more time on the other parts. He's going to have a whole bunch of additional factories here at the bottom. He's going to be ruling the air with another Tech 2. There we go. And with another triad, just to protect this little investment that we have here. And maybe another anti-air turret. Right there at the corner, very useful place. And usually you would want to build some more walls and all that sort of stuff. But for the sake of argument, in this case, you won't have all of that. And we're going to make some simple groups. Simple groups in terms of M1 starting M1 land platoon A, which is just going to be a land platoon of the tanks that we're going to patrol the base with. Back to units, we're going to spawn in some tanks. These are remainders of the fact that this guy used to have some form of land factory capacities. Let's get this going. All right, and we're going to make another one. M1 land, platoon B. And this is going to be very similar. Make sure you've got it selected, copy, paste, and now we pasted them into the other group. And this one's going to spawn somewhere there. So we've got two groups. We're going to need some air, initial air platoon 2. So let's go for that. M1 air platoon A. And I am blind. Oh, there they are. So let's just make this a small bomber platoon. That's just going to protect our base. Bomber platoon A. And a small interceptor platoon. M1 interceptor platoon A. And just to make sure that I fix that typo. Gotta be consistent here. Let's see. We can add in some interceptors. And these interceptors are going to protect both our allied UEF base and ourselves. There we go. All right. So that's it for the units. Now, as I mentioned, we want these to be patrolling. So in order to make sure that these fellas here patrol, we kind of want to have a chain where they can patrol in. So let's go here and say, call this chain M1 UEF ally base patrol. Something like that. It's by far not the best name that I've had, but now we should be able to just... No. Alright, let's try that again. Remove these. So now if I click on this and then I make markers, there we go. So now we can see that they have the blank markers, and we're just going to name these blank markers 01, which is very 03 because the chain starts there. 01, 02, and actually this should be the air patrol, I suppose, of the bombers. So it's a pretty poor naming convention that we have here. But let's call this M1 UEF land patrol. Patrol 01. And again, that's going to be for this platoon right here, right? For platoon A. And we kind of just want them to patrol like that. Patrol that side of the base. So let's get this. Land patrol. This is marker 01. 01. Now, technically, you don't have to rename these markers, but it just makes it so much more convenient if you ever have to ask for help. Otherwise, you would have blank marker number 210. Not informative. And then I should have named this A, I suppose, because we're going to have 2 patrols. So this is a great start. Let's get these guys here with A in it. Oops. Yeah. There we go. All right. I'm going to leave this one for what it is because I want to make some attack chains. So there's going to be a hostile base somewhere there and one somewhere there. So we're going to need, say, 2 attack chains that go that direction and 2 attack chains that go this direction. So let's look at that. We can, again, M1 UEF ally attack east, which would be something like that, maybe. And this would be east A, which is one possible chain. So now we have these markers. Let's rename them 01, 02, and I think I'm already passing 24 minutes here, so let's get this going. 03. Yeah, I'm just gonna do and finalize this one side, just to attack east. This is gonna be chain B, and chain B, make sure that's selected. That's going to go like that. So here we have 0.1, 01, but it should be B. Alright, and then we have 02, and then we have 03. Now, for the sake of argument, I'm just going to leave this at what we have right now, because I really want to dive into the actual code. So let's do that. Now we already have, start recording, yes. A pretty good example. We're gonna need some things before we do anything at all. And primarily, we are going to need to set the playable area. Now note that I'm gonna look a lot at how the campaign missions already do it, and I highly recommend you to do sort of the same thing. If you played the campaign missions, the co-op missions, just think of a scenario that you thought was pretty cool and you want to replicate, and then just open up the script files and see how they did it. Note that these examples are not always perfect examples, but they're at least going to give you a good direction to go to. So this is in on start, so let's do something like this here too. Function M1. I think they have functions like this in here too. Start mission 1, let's call it like that. Start mission 1, so let's set the playable area. And we named that the same thing, right? So if you look here at the playable area, this value here, that references an actual area in our scenario, which is this one right here. So that's not a magical value. If you named this something else, then you need to change this name here. While we're at it, let's just start up the game.
You're missing,
no.
You don't have capital A in the map editor, in the area name. Typo.
Oh no. Okay, so it's case sensitive, and we should probably call this. And let's just start up the game while we're at it. Now you can test this using the FAF client. I'm gonna test it using the development environment. Either is fine. And once you're in the lobby, you can open up Skirmish and then search for the map. FAF version. Oh no. It is a free player map. There it is. So we've kind of forgot to rename it. Here in the file, it's still called Frozen Firefly. Anyway, that's our perfect map. Note again that we have these 2 additional spots. We should definitely not pick those, because those are the UEF ally and UEF enemy, which is in the co-op mod. They are skipped as considered same slots. Also note that the commander position is up way here in the corner, and that's because we didn't define a spawn location. So let's just immediately fix that. We can go to markers. We actually already made that marker right there. And this should be called Army 01. And this matches the army name that we have here, which is Army 1. So this should not be 01, this should be 1. And now if we would reload the game, then it would know about that. Let's hope we didn't already break everything. It loaded the script file. Okay, so it got our spawn point. And as you can see, it got the playable area right. And it essentially did nothing else. And that's kind of what we would expect, because we're not telling it to do anything else yet. So let's start doing that right away. We usually, as you can see in these files, they separate the bases and their logic in separate files. We're going to do that too, but not for this first session. For this first session, we're just going to make something that works, and the next session we're going to refactor this into a separate file and then call it from there. So here we have ally UEF, or it was UEF ally South base, which is this base manager that I currently can't find. So let's look at where it finds this base manager, which is in this import right here. So let's add that in. at the top of our file. Requires 4 arguments, but it's receiving 0. Those arguments are optional, I suppose. All right. So let's look at what we have right here. Now, initialize difficulty tables. If I'm not mistaken, this tells it the base that it should be looking at. Let's actually do this one. So let's just start picking out what all of this here means so that we have an understanding of it. Yep, there we go. So this is the army brains. Now, corp files usually define the armies of the AIs as numbers. So let's do that here too. Army numbers. So we have UEF ally, which is number 2, because if we go to our save file, scenario file, then it's here at place 2, 1, 2, 3. Then we have a local player, player 1, which is army number 1. And that means that here, this army brains is a global table that contains all the army brains in the same order that you put them in here in this table. So here we just provide UEF ally, so this returns a brain. This is, let's look at the type which it can't find. So let's give it the right base. Now we can just use this intelligence, and this is really where the beauty starts to shine in. We can use this intelligence to make sense of what we're doing. The first one is the brain, the instance of the brain class. We did that using the global army brains. This is the base name, and that refers to the unit group, as we can see right there. It's a unit group.
Actually, that's not true. The base name is anything. That's the location. It doesn't need to match anything.
Okay, so this is just a name for us.
Yes, this is just a name. Like, it makes sense to name it something similar to what the main group is gonna be, but it can be anything.
Okay, so this is just a reference for ourselves. But as Speed2 mentions, and the fact that I need to update the annotation here then, we should likely just name it something that closely references what we're doing with it. And in this case, that's going to be M1 South Base without the difficulty part. So this can essentially be anything. Then we have this base marker, which we got to define still. And that kind of tells the AI, gives it an indication of, whoops. Oh, save it, restart. This marker is going to give the AI an indication of what units are part of the base and what is not part of the base. So let's place
Marker goes very tightly with the number that is the next argument, which is radius, and it controls like what factories and engineers are in the base. So it's gonna use that marker, which is a position on the map, and the radius to control all engineers and factories in that radius around the marker, and also form platoons.
Yeah, so let's just use the same naming convention, marker. So here we would have M1 South Base underscore marker. Then this is the radius that Speed2 was talking about. So we have this radius around this marker, which is pretty difficult to visualize, but that's roughly, I'd say 60 is fine in this case, but let's just make sure that we got everything and turn that to 80. And this last one is a level table,
which is actually the name of the unit group that you've created, that you want to spawn. So and you don't need to specify the D2, D3 suffix because that is added automatically because you're calling the initially difficulty tables.
So that would be this right there. And the difficulty bits with underscore D1 are then added to that depending on the difficulty. All right. Then for the next part, which are these two, this tells the game that we start with a base that already exists. Where
yeah, so one more thing. So there is also the base that you set to spawn. It also like equals 100. The 100 is a priority of this base. You could have some multiple groups there. And now the next line, which is done start non-zero base, basically tells it to create all the groups that have a higher priority than 0. So in our case, it's just this one with priority 100.
All right. And we can actually look at the definition. Oh, by control left clicking on it. And then here you can see indeed that it starts spawning in groups, which are defined previously. I'm just trying to find where that suffix is added. Oh well. But this is where we create the actual base, and we kind of define how many engineers the base should have, where this engineer number depends on the difficulty, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Which in our case we should reverse, right? Because we kind of want the base, if I'm not mistaken, no, we should not reverse this. Because if the base is on the... Oh well, we should, because if the base is on easy difficulty, then we want a very powerful base with a lot of engineers. But if we are on the high difficulty, then we want a base with very few engineers. That's very weak.
Yeah.
Because in this case, we're making an allied base and not a hostile base. So in fact, it may not have been a very great place to start, because now all the numbers are reversed. And then this is actually an interesting one. The base manager ships with a bunch of default behaviors, which are called these activation functions that you see right here. And we can kind of tell the base to do some default behavior already. And in this case, we wanted to do air scouting, which is something that is this one right here. And that tells the base to just scout. Which is not bad. Let's just put that on true. So now, if I'm not mistaken, if we restart our map and we make sure that we are allied to set diplomacy, set alliance, yeah, we make sure that army 1 or player 1 and UEF ally are allied so that we can actually see him, then it should already be doing something. But I could be wrong. Ah, perfect. Attempt to loop over field locations. We're missing something here. I think that would be the scout locations.
No, we don't need any code locations.
But we are missing something. Did the attempt to loop over field locations in nil value. Remove build location, initialize difficulty. What are we missing here?
Can you show the error? So remove. So the only location it's trying to remove is the main, because that's like the basic one. But maybe the main location is not added.
Maybe I should
by default.
But what do you mean with the main location?
Well, the base manager adds a build location to the army brain.
Yeah.
And there is one build location that is called main, and it is trying to remove it. And I don't know if the main location is default in skirmishes or if it's a campaign thing only.
Okay. Well, there goes my plan then. Let's see how this works out. Maybe I just forgot to save And
that's my educated guess from reading the error.
yeah. Okay. That is great. So let's see what we have here then. We go to AI brain. Can we cheat our way out of this? Has platoon list. The locations.
I would say go into the base manager LA file and let's cheat in there.
Yeah, but we can't really cheat because this is part of the
Oh, yeah.
extension. But
Okay,
we're just
yeah.
trying to understand what this location's value is because it's not defined here.
It is like you just see it, remove build location false main.
Okay, so let's search for that.
I think this is the error.
Remove main since you don't use it in ops much.
My other guess
the
would be since you're playing skirmish, then all the armies are
Yeah.
maybe considered as players, or just
I think that's
maybe
the case.
the armies are not even created since you don't have anyone taking the slots, so they might be even missing. So maybe the whole army doesn't exist even.
I think we can get around this by let's just do one more try. And it could be that the entire brain doesn't exist. That's true.
Yeah, right. So just put some AIs in it.
That's the plan. So let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's remove this because we don't need that. And then I don't know why this happens sometimes, but then it just doesn't want to exit. So that's always a bit odd. Let's try again. Okay, so bottom line is we should have set up the co-op thing first. Put in an AI. There we go. And now there should be no command unit because we're not initializing the armies. But there should be a base. Nope. It doesn't like this one bit. Okay, that's frustrating. It says type is start location. Main. If base name is not main. This is I haven't even I didn't even know this was a thing. Okay. Location type. Okay, well that ends this section, I suppose. Let's just look at this in a break.